How's it going, Andrew?
What's up, dude? What a fun storm we're having.
What a fun 3 day storm we're having. Holy cow, it just don't stop.
Yeah, I think you've been getting hit harder than I have. I think the lake has been protecting me a little bit because for our listeners, when we were recording this, if you're on our Discord, I posted a video of me like 10 minutes ago standing on my porch videotaping the storm. What I didn't realize is I left the window in my office open and there was water being blown in the window onto my computer. So that was a bit of a heart attack before this episode. So a little flustered, but yeah, I mean, there's been tornadoes going through. I know a couple of brothers had one go through their backyard in Burlington.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah,
Take down some trees. Yeah, it seems intense out there.
That's crazy. I know me personally out here in Waukesha, like you see what I see just after it's already come past me. But yeah, I think we've been catching the brunt of it when it comes to the winds and stuff. Milwaukee's still getting just as much water as we have, but I don't think I've ever had as many tornado warnings in such a short period of time as I have between today and yesterday, because there would be one and then it would be like over, and then there'd be another one, and then there'd be another one, and then there'd be another one. And there was a couple of times last night where I was watching out the window debating whether I was going to say, all right, time to go in the basement, because there's some funky swirly cloud action going on. And then tonight, right before we hopped on this, there was a point where I have a tri-level for those that don't know, got down, we went down to the lower level to be closer to the basement just in case, because I was watching the trees in my backyard just about bend over at a 45 plus degree angle, and the rain was coming down purely sideways. I mean, it was bad out there, and it was too dark to see the sky, so I couldn't tell what exactly was going on.
Yesterday I did what every Midwestern dad does, and I was sitting in my garage with a six-pack. And for my listeners, I have a two-sided garage, so the garage opens towards the street, but it also opens towards the yard. So I had the yard side open so I could stare out towards the north. And I was seeing videos from my friends who live north of me just getting bombarded, like hail the size of their palms, like crazy stuff. And then it's not even raining by me, and I can just see on the horizon just lightning going insane. I'm sending them videos like, is that you guys up there that's getting just laid into? And so I sat there waiting for like the cool stuff to happen. Now, this is how nerdy I am. When I saw that there was hail the size of your palm, I was like, well, if I'm going to be running back indoor and outdoor, so I was sitting out there with a rain jacket and a bike helmet on. I was like, dude, if this stuff is the size of golf balls, I'm not trying to get hit in the head. So,
right.
So running in with a bike helmet on.
My garage, unfortunately, pretty much opens facing due east.
It's never a good view. I mean,
no,
because it'll come over your head.
It'll come from behind me, so it doesn't give me any warning of what's coming, unfortunately. So instead, I was sitting up in my bedroom, which the window of faces almost due west.
Yep, so see what's going on. Yep.
And I'm nice and high there, right? Because it drops down below my house, or behind my house, to the west. So when I'm looking out that way, I have a high vantage point, and I can see farther, and I'm looking in the right direction.
Yep. Oh, I know. And I saw there was those. My brother lives in Madison, and he had hail that was truly the size of his knuckle. Like, I didn't know if you saw the videos of Lake Minota where it just looks like baseballs are falling into the lake, like splashing everywhere. And I was like, dude, this is crazy. So yeah, it's fun here. We're having a good time. So in my basement, I have windows on all sides. Which I'm like, this is counterproductive to tornadoes, because most of the time what gets you on a tornado, because it's semi-rare that a tornado will go right through the middle of like 10 people's houses. It'll usually hit one, but the glass will still break and blow through your entire house. So a lot of the danger of tornadoes is flying glass that cuts people up. And so I'm sitting there going, this basement's not like great for this. So there's a workbench in one corner that's underneath a window, but it kind of half covers it with plywood. And I went, that's probably the best place to hide. So then I took legitimately cushions from my son's cushion fort, surrounded the workbench, and covered it in a comforter. So if we had to go down, we could hop in under that really sturdy workbench, cover yourself with the blanket covering it and those cushions, so that if glass went shattering everywhere, hopefully you wouldn't get
Right.
blasted with it. So
Are they
making a
like the
shelter.
old school glass windows, like the ones that you could
Yeah.
open and stuff?
Yep.
Well, you know, if they're standard size windows, it's super easy to replace those with glass block. We could
smaller.
legitimately get that done really.
They're like this big. I mean, you could still do it with glass block. You would only need like 4
Right.
instead of like 6. Yeah, I've been wanting to do that with glass block.
Yeah.
I don't need to open those.
Right. I just, if they're standard size, they actually make like prefabbed glass block to just slide right in there after you get the old window out. But yeah, we could figure that out.
Yeah, it would be nice because, I was like, dude, this is sketchy. I was like, I have nowhere to hide besides, and then I saw I could go under the stairs, sort of, but there's nothing blocking the door, and there's a window across from it, like the opening. I was like, well, still glass, so I'd have to like crawl really deep into the spider den. The other option is crawling under that crawl space that I showed you underneath my extension into the nightmare hole.
No.
And I think I'd rather get a tornado than go in there. I'd rather get tornadoed.
That's how horror movies start. It's not.
I'd rather deal with the glass than go into that creepy dirt-filled garbage hole underneath my extension.
Right.
That's a scary place.
for sure.
It's covered in centipedes.
All right. Well, on that note, speaking of scary things, since you have a mystery topic for me tonight, we should get started.
All right, I'll hit the music.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right, mystery topic time. So
Hey.
let's kick this off with a question for you, Matt. When you first joined Masonry, what were you actually looking for?
Ooh, that's a fun question. You know, I was sold. I was all in on the, it'll help you learn how to be a better man. You'll have a closer bond with brothers here than you would ever have, outside of it. And, I found that to be true for sure. I found both of them to be true, actually. But, there's a good chunk of it that was just straight up curiosity and wanting to see what the unknown aspect to it was, right? It was like, we can tell you this stuff, but that's all we can tell you. And it was like, well, what's the other stuff? So I'm a very curious individual. So it piqued my curiosity, and everybody that I spoke to about it spoke about it highly. So I was like, all right, well, what do I have to lose?
Yeah, so similar for me, I was looking for a connection with history as well as an initiatic system and to learn more about the mysteries of Freemasonry. I didn't come in searching for fellowship and brotherhood. I just found that along the way and was like, this is awesome. So I had a similar thing. And so today's episode is going to be about initiation. And it's going to be we're going to talk today about how in the modern world, the male initiation ceremonies have been replaced with other things, and how Masonry has a way of filling that gap that we kind of lost historically. So, to get us kicked off, the interesting thing is that the loss of male initiation, which used to be fairly common practice is still practiced around a lot of places in the world, but not really in the West as much, especially in the United States. Instead of doing a formal initiation ceremony, change from the before to after, usually manhood or a maturity, it's been replaced with graduation ceremonies, promotions at work, making captain of a football team, things like that. And I would argue those don't have the same impact as a true initiation.
I would agree. There were a lot of different initiatic experiences in the past, and I'm struggling to think of them because my brain's kind of fried right now. I would say one that's been consistent throughout time would maybe be if you choose. Right, here's the key part. If you choose, since we've only done a draft once, I would say boot camp is probably one of the few remaining
male
initiatic experiences that hasn't gotten lost
sure
over time.
Yep, absolutely. And I would agree that that's one of those, but instead of being reborn as like a a high-minded man, you're reborn as a Marine. You're reborn as a Army soldier.
Right.
Like, you're rebuilt into that. There's the before and the after. First you were a dude, now you're a Marine. And so,
Right.
but it definitely still serves that function. So what I was wrestling with, so today I was listening to Masonic Initiation by Wilmshurst, and I was realizing that I need to listen to Wilmshurst more because he does a good job of making me feel bad about myself and being like, oh, I need to do better. But it got me thinking that I think there's like a real restlessness that men have seeking something like that. And even though for the most part it's like disappeared in modern society, the hunger never went away. I think people are still searching for initiation.
I would agree, because I'm really trying to think, there's even, I don't know if it was so much an initiatic experience. I guess it was more of a rite of passage, but I guess you could kind of lump those two loosely together. A lot of kids today aren't even getting like their driver's license. Like, that was a big thing when I was younger. When I turned 16, that was a huge rite of passage. That signaled the beginning of you entering manhood, right? You were approaching it, and you were approaching it quickly. And that was a way to know that for sure. And now with a lot of people not even doing that anymore, it's kind of like, well, what is there anymore? Like, how do you define when you've left childhood and entered adulthood these days? You see a lot of kids living at home longer just because of affordability issues or the expense of schooling, or all that kind of stuff. And it's like, so there's no clean break, because even like going off to college or getting your own apartment at 18 or something like that, that was another way to signal that you were transitioning from childhood into adulthood, and that just doesn't exist in as high of a quantity anymore.
Absolutely. And I think rites of passages and initiations are related, but somewhat different. Like you're saying, like, I think a rite of passage is something that signifies like the passage of time. Like, you move to the next thing. An initiation usually serves the function that's more metaphysical, is how I describe it. So it's more like you've now been given. Every initiatic system, if you look through history, provides something that is like, these are the rules of the work plan to follow. So if you were in a tribe, perchance, they would tell you what their cosmological values were, and that you have to like live up to them, right? And stuff like that. If you think about the Greeks and the Romans with their initiatic, and the Egyptians, they had similar things. They all kind of follow this structure. Whereas I think when you talk about a rite of passage, it's similar, but usually I think they're a little bit different,
Right. That's why I said loosely related.
Yep.
I'm just struggling to come up with good contemporary examples of true initiatic experiences right now. And it's like, what I mean, confirmation, maybe, if you come from like a church-going family.
I don't think that's an initiation. I think that's still a rite of passage. That's a religious rite of passage. Yep. And
Right.
similar, I would argue that a bat mitzvah and a quinceanera are also not initiatic experiences, but they're rites of passages. So initiatic experience doesn't necessarily have to signify manhood. There are rites of passages that do that, and there's some more culturally ascribed ones. You can get an initiation at any age, and it basically says you're going from the mundane you to something more sacred or something more high-minded is usually the goal of an initiation.
Right.
So that does bring up good points. So then what is an initiation? So I was doing some research, and there's a good book. I actually think, what was it called again? I was just reading it on Kindle. I think it's called Rites of Passages, actually, which is kind of funny, but it's by where's my phone? Hold on. Van Gennep. It's one of like the classic books on initiations. He basically described it in the first couple of chapters as requiring three things: a separation from what you were, an ordeal in a liminal space, and reintegration as something changed. So no matter how they clothe it, those are like the three structures that are always kind of included.
Okay.
So in Masonry, without going into detail, you're separated because of the way that you're clothed and things like that. A lodge is a liminal space because it's not public nor is it private. It's this liminal space that's tiled. So I guess it's sort of private. It's an in-between area. And then there's a reintegration as a symbolic ego death.
Oh, sorry. I'm still sitting here trying to rack my brain, especially after we like clearly defined it now. going outside of the two examples we've given, right? Boot camp, Freemasonry. What? A fraternity, maybe in college?
Yep.
Like that,
they have some of those, yep.
You know,
I think that's why people are
wasn't in
attracted to
one,
Greek
so I
life,
don't
though.
know.
I mean, I think you guys at Marquette had a similar rite of passage, too. At least from my Marquette friends, I heard you guys do like a retreat that's another rite of passage.
Marquette High, yeah, the Kairos retreat. It's a Jesuit high school thing. Yep.
But yeah, so if you think about it, when we look at it Masonically, we follow that structure too. And so when I was reading back on Meaning of Masonry, also Wilmshurst, he essentially describes that there are 3 stages that we go through as a Mason. The entered apprentice, which is traditionally he brought up a good point in Masonic initiation. He goes, traditionally that was 7 years. And from his perspective, he goes, why 7? He goes, well, because the body turns over every single cell in 7 years. So for him, symbolically, he goes, when you start the route of an entered apprentice, even if you're a master mason for, 3 years, he goes, well, you have to start the purification and applying the work for 7 for your body to be a completely new body. And then hopefully the purification is taken root, which I think is pretty cool with us both on a health journey right now.
Right.
The Fellowcraft was 5 years in operative masonry, which was less time needed, but it was taken for illumination. So learning discipline, self-control, and general knowledge of things. And then, so symbolically, you'd be 12 years old, sort of, quote unquote, in Masonic age. And then the Master Mason is symbolically represented as the age of 30 for numerical reasons that I didn't get to in the book yet, but I'm sure they're fascinating, which deals with ego, death, and a spiritual rebirth. So we have those 3 things, and there's a quote I wrote down from Wilmshurst, and that made me feel equally bad about myself. Wilmshurst said that Masons who treat degrees as merely ceremonial form without pursuing the inner meaning is like a man who receives a map to a buried treasure, but decides to hang it on the wall as a decoration. And I was like, don't make me feel bad.
I like it. Though, that's part of the whole thing, though, right? If he's not trying to make you feel bad, he's trying to remind you that this is supposed to be self-improvement and work.
Yep. And I think that what makes me interested is that, like, there's something I'm going to get to later in the podcast. It's going to be another brain turner before I go down the thing. But to add to your list, too, my brain's been racking a little bit, too, on other things that people are finding instead in their search for initiation. What about the ayahuasca ceremonies?
Oh, yeah, those are
popular right now.
Talking about those these days.
Yep. And then there's various wilderness retreats people might go on. Right. Boy Scouts offers like an order within it that it probably seems initiatic.
Yeah, there's a few out there. I just heard somebody the other day talking on a podcast about I can't remember what they were called now, but they it's a group that goes out and they can't really bring, they're allowed a few modern amenities like a cooler to help keep food cold, but otherwise everything that they have to use and live in can't be like anything newer than they would have had in 1842 or something like that.
Well, that's fun and scary.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking, though. So initiation is something that we endeavor to do. Is the form that we use in the work enough if we have forgotten what the meaning is behind it as officers who are performing the initiation? Does doing it really well matter more than actually understanding the work? Does there need to be a mental component?
I think both are important, right? The more you study it to do it well will generally tend to lead to greater understanding of what you're dealing with, right? If you're studying it correctly and actually thinking about what you're studying. So there's part A of what I have to say. Part B is, I think the ability to deliver it well is also important for the understanding of the person you're initiating. Because if you do it sloppy, they're not going to take it as seriously.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking so I came at it from 2 angles. From a spiritual sense, if this is a spiritual divine act of an initiation, having the understanding along with a good performance, I think is the sweet spot, because I think it delivers better. But if you have someone who understands everything but is horrible at ritual, I think it offsets it. Now it's just bad. But then I started thinking like a method actor. Someone who puts their mind into the character and truly understands it. Think of, Heath Ledger playing the Joker, where he would walk around set pretending to be the Joker all the time. I think it creates a more powerful experience when people are actually completely understanding the what, where, and why of what they're doing, because I think it resonates in the way that they perform as well. So I think it is important, because Wilmshurst made me feel bad about myself. I think it is important that as officers, we really need to take a higher standard to understand why. When we're in each little part, try to really learn the why, because I think that's huge in creating more of an initiatic experience.
I would agree. I mean, in theory, as officers, you should be holding yourself to a higher standard just in general. And actually, there you go. There's an initiatic experience within Freemasonry, which would be going through the officer line, but that's a very long initiatic experience.
Well, that's going to get in the next section. I would actually argue that's a rite of passage. So, yeah.
Oh.
Well, so what's interesting is you think about, like, we have all these people coming searching for initiation, right? That's one of the things they're searching for. Sometimes they don't describe it as that. They say they're trying to find out more about the mystery. To me, that translates to that. That is the mystery, right? As serving pancakes is not the mystery. As, having a pint isn't the mystery. The mystery is what we teach, and that treasure map that we endeavor to hand out to people, and that inspiration we hope to give them. So
right, where the green beans are buried. Yep,
where we hide the hidden cheese curd recipe of Wisconsin. But that makes me wonder. So as that system that treasure map points to is an internal transformation, it's an inner experience. It's the inner, not the external. But being an officer in our system is an outer function. It serves with the outer portions of the craft. Do you think that being an officer hampers or hurts one's inner transformation on their Masonic journey? As far, like, does it slow it down because they focus? I mean, think of all the podcast episodes we talk about just the art of running a lodge and stuff like that, because we're thinking of the outer actions rather than the inner. And because I was thinking about that when I was listening, I was like, I haven't had time to think about the esoteric aspects of Masonry since I was like senior deacon. Ever since that, I've just been focused on running the lodge and doing officer stuff.
Yeah, but you're living, and through your lived experience, carrying out those same esoteric lessons as you progress through that line. You may not be sitting down and studying them in a book or meditating on them or contemplating them like that. You're legitimately getting those lessons in real time in a lived experience as you move through those chairs. And subconsciously, you should be taking away those lessons that you're getting taught in those chairs, whether it be patience or empathy when dealing with people, or any number of values that are needed to be a successful leader. You are developing those and then carrying those into other parts of your life. So it might not be like right there in your face, meditative, I'm sitting down studying this stuff, but you're getting it through lived experience, which is sometimes more valuable, in my opinion.
I would argue you are partially correct from my experience, that I think some of our lessons are outward focused and some are inward focused lessons that we're taught. And I think when you're an officer, a lot of your eggs get put into that outward practice, which is still filling some of those lessons. But I think there still is the requirement to look at the internal lessons as well. Because like you said, like if you're doing just the repetitions, but you're not ever trying to learn the meaning, it doesn't necessarily set you up for failure because it's still sitting there. So when you finally turn your view on it, it's going to be easier for you to start working that, right? But if you're doing it simultaneously, even better, and it'll improve your performance. I think that also I was taking, when I was listening to this book today, as a reminder that I need to pause and actually listen to masonry stuff again, because I've been doing so much masonry that I swear when I'm listening to an audiobook or a podcast, I'm like, I just need a break. Like, I think it all day. I do it all day. I'm going to go listen to something else. But coming back and listening to it again after, a year or two off of really doing a lot of masonry in my ears, besides listening to a couple of our friends' podcasts that we like to listen to, and I like to listen to occasionally as well. But to actually listen to like some of the hardcore stuff, like Wilmshurst, of course, made me go, right. This does feel like something I kind of forgot to pay attention to. And you know what it makes me want to do?
What's that?
So I've been trying to think of like, how I said that when I'm out of the East, I'd want to be a counselor and do education work. And I've been trying to think of this like Lake University or something. I'd give it probably some stupid Latin name or something silly. And it'd be focused on education, but actually what I would want to make it focused on is applying the lessons completely. So like, instead of just being like, we're going to read old papers, it would be more directed at how do we do what we've been taught? Because what's interesting, what Wilmshurst was saying is that masonry is not a religion. It is a art and a science. He goes, because it's an applied thing. It's not just an idea in the ether. It is a do thing. It's a progressive science. And he said, as a progressive science, it improves or changes year after year, generation after generation. And so it has to be done as in an art form, you know what I mean, or a craft.
Right. I agree. I do want to backtrack to something you said a second ago, or a minute ago at this point, about essentially Masonic fatigue, right? You were so consumed with Freemasonry that you needed to take a break from it. And I've been there. I've done that where I was consuming so much Masonic content all the time and thinking about Freemasonry all the time that I was like, man, I need a break.
Yep.
And what I've found is it's good to have a mix. Like, there's times where I'll go a couple months without listening to a Masonic podcast, and then I'll go binge them and catch up on them all again because I'm like ready for it. Right. And then what I've started doing when it comes to reading books is I alternate now. Masonic book, not Masonic book. Masonic book, not Masonic book. And, it doesn't matter whether the book in between is fiction or nonfiction, but I try to, especially like things that I can also learn something from. Like, right now I'm reading the history of the Children of Ash and Elm, A History of the Vikings.
Yep.
Next up, I think I'm going to read Jeremy Renner's book, which should be interesting because he wrote it about surviving that whole getting run over by his snowcat experience and, for all rights and purposes being dead.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. You remember when that happened, right? Hawkeye?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So he's got a book about that whole thing now, so I'm really fascinated to read that. There's a couple other ones about people that have had struggles over the course of their lives, and I think reading those stories are just as valuable for us improving ourselves, like taking those lessons from other people's lives. I'm trying to... Josh Brolin, I have his book on deck too. But, I think it's important to give yourself a break and to also source valuable information from other places as well, because if you take the time to step away from reading Masonic content directly and read this other book, and then you're going to come back to Masonic content and you might go, oh, well, those principles existed over there too, and then start really putting the pieces together into a bigger picture of everything.
Yeah, Strider is just my Grand Master all along. The once and future king. But yeah, I think too, the other thing that has been wrapping my head around is I'm starting to realize that a lot of our work in the officer line is focused on a lot of the outer work, which is necessary and important, and one of the most important things you need to know as an officer. But what would it look like if we actually, as officers, tried to assist each other in small ways of doing the inner work, which made me think maybe as part of my officer meetings, my quarterly officer meeting, if I could include a small bit on like hey, so this quarter I want us to all try to remove a bad habit. And here's some techniques and some ways we can start, and then just have fun with it as an officer crew, like in tiny ones, like a small education, like, I'm reading Atomic Habits. You guys should maybe check it out too. Here's some of the basics, though, if you don't want to read a book right now. now, let's all try as officers to have fun. Pick one small habit, even if it's just chewing your nails. And let's work this quarter on seeing if we can apply our common gavels or something like that. I think that could be a fun little exercise to do as officers, to make sure as officers we're working the inner and outer work simultaneously.
Sure. You know what I need from you? Because I want to understand you better on this, right? I want to know what you're considering outer and what you're considering inner.
Inner work is things that you change within yourself. Outer work is things that you share with the world or they manifest outward. So like inner work would be better time management. It's something that is personal. Whether there's someone there or not, it exists, right? In the absence of others, it is a thing. So if you're sitting in a room by yourself and there's no one that you can apply it to, what is the application of that? That would be more of an inner work. So that could be learning to quiet your mind or to control your impulses. Could be, No,
I got you. So I'm going to challenge you now. I'm going to challenge you on this.
Oh boy.
So you brought up time management as an inner value, which you've said that being in the officer line doesn't necessarily help you work on. However, I would say that your time management skills have probably improved since you've been in the officer line.
Sure, but not for everybody. You know what I mean? So it has to be a sought after work. And I'm not saying the officer line doesn't give you these byproducts by any means. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying a chosen set practice on working on a specific thing to try to sharpen it, to min-max it.
Okay. So what was one of the other things you just said as inner?
Vices and superfluidities.
Yeah. No, you said one, and you had just said one in specific. Oh, impulse control. So being a leader forces you to be less reactionary and more thoughtful in the way you handle things. And I would say that ties directly into impulse control.
Sure. I'm not disagreeing, but I'm saying it's the awareness of the work that can be the powerful tool too. So while it might happen, then you go, okay, I'm doing it here. Where can I apply this more? And so it's more of like doing a holistic work with it than just, I know what we're saying. There's the thought experience and then there's just the experience. I get it. They both are valuable, and one without the other is more or less useless, right? You need the lecture and the lab, right? So you need to be able to sit there with it and say, I'm going to prove it. And then ideally in a good situation, Lodge is the dojo where you go to practice masonry, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it'd be fun to go back and forth with it. So you have some time to actually do a little lecture on it and then do a little lab on it.
Right. No, and I'm not saying the book learning part of it, to call it that, right? The book learning part of it, the classroom
theory,
part of it,
the theory section,
right?
Yeah,
isn't important. I'm just saying that I don't think being in the officer line hampers your development in any way. I think it would probably more so enhance your ability, especially if you combine the two of them.
Correct. That I'm saying, what I was trying to say was that not that the officer line hurts it, but I'm saying if done mindlessly, it could be distracting from the work, depending on the culture of your lodge and the demands, if you're not doing the inner and the external simultaneously. Well, otherwise, I would argue it is one of the better ways to do it if you're doing both, because you do get that practice space and applied value.
Okay, so now you crossed a critical topic there that I hadn't thought of that I'm going to bring up. In either scenario, you need to be conscious of what you're doing or what you're taking in, right? I could sit there and read a Masonic book with my mind wandering the whole time and not get anything out of it. I could be in the officer line, not learning all these things because I'm not conscious of the things I am learning or are being afforded to me to be able to be learned, right? So it's mindfulness and being present in the situations you are in or paying attention to what you are doing that ultimately determines how well you bring those lessons into your life and how well you apply them.
Yep. It's like what you're conscious of is what you become, right? And so, when I talk in that education I do on the opening and closing and why it's so important, you can sit there and zone out every time they do it and you'll learn nothing. Or you can choose to be conscious and actually absorb it and let your mind wrap your head around what it's showing you over and over and over, and let that actually have a conscious experience. But that also brings up the point that I'm talking about. Is it important that the officers understand the why behind what they're doing in ritual? Because then when they're conscious of it, not only does it have the transformative effect on themselves, I think it enhances it for the participant, and it allows the officer, when asked a question, to confidently go, oh, I can tell you exactly why we do it like that. And that, I think, is a crucial moment in the mentorship program when a entered apprentice goes, I was curious about this. And if you go, I don't really know, then I don't think any officer should say that. I think if they say that, they should say the classic, Matt, that we always say, I don't know, but I will get back to you, because now I need to do some learning too. And fill in those gaps.
Or I don't know, but we're going to go right over to that guy who can give us both the answer, and we're going to learn together.
Yep, because I think that's kind of what I'm talking about too, is the building of the inner understanding of Masonry too, to be able to be stronger mentors.
Right. Nope. I hear you. I think we were on the same page. It was just the way you were wording some of it was throwing me off. So we needed to get to a point where I had to challenge the way I was understanding your thoughts.
We had to get to the dialectics.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it is one of those things though that I think it's a reminder, like, how Wilmshurst, who, once again, I will say with Wilmshurst, who I love, he's just another Masonic author with another opinion on Masonry. So I will say he's not for everybody, and his version of Masonry is not necessarily the correct one. It's his version, but I do enjoy that he views our degrees not as a ceremony, but as like a genuine spiritual transformation, that like it actually not only fills that hunger you had for initiation, but actually has an internal practice to teach that does raise you to be a better, higher-minded person, more enlightened being of sorts. And, we just don't want to be hanging that map on the wall.
Right. Well, yeah, if you take the lessons of Freemasonry seriously, it's not gonna the experience isn't instantly like you're not gonna get done with your first 3 degrees and go, all right, I'm a better person. But you should get done with the 3 degrees and go, man, I have a higher standard to live up to, and I better get to work.
Well, and it brings up a good point too, that how I was saying the inner transformation is the thing that you would be doing in a room when there can't be a single person. If you were locked in a prison cell, you could do the inner work, right? That a lot of people are disenfranchised Masonry, being like, how come these people aren't making me better? And you're like, well, no, because they can't. You have to seek and you have to search, and it's incumbent on you to have the inspiration. Obviously, in the ideal world, you should have mentors and supporters who actually know what they're talking about to assist you. But at the end of the day, they put the tools in their hands, say, you are a master. Now go work. Right. And so it's incumbent on you to do that. But yeah.
It is. And if there is nobody surrounding you that you feel like you can emulate or look up to try to find a source of inspiration for how you can improve as well, right? Then you need to increase your circle of search, or you need to do enough studying for yourself to become that person in your circle.
Yep. And if you can't find a mentor nearby, you need to find at least somebody to help you. Because if you're doing it by yourself, obviously you should be able to do it by yourself, but the point of the brotherhood is that you shouldn't have to do it alone, right?
Right. There should be people to help guide you, not to give you the answers, but to guide you to the answers, right? To set you on the path, we'll put it that way.
Here's an interesting question. What did you feel like the night after you were initiated?
What did I get myself into? No, I felt like I was hungry for more, is the way I would put it. I was excited for the rest of the journey, and I felt like, probably more subconsciously at that point, I realized a lot of my shortcomings at that time, because I feel like it just kind of opened my eyes, and I was like, whoa, there's something more to like everything, and I really need to focus my energies on more productive things and correct some of these issues I know have been stewing for a long time, and really maybe not even always completely consciously get to work on some of it and pay attention to it.
I think for me, I felt kind of like the fire hose where I was like, that was a lot of info. And at the same time, I was like, oh, this is what I was looking for. Like at the end of it, I was like, oh, this is exactly kind of what I came here for. I wanted this weird stuff. And it also, for me, almost immediately being, so ADHD where I can be so scattered with my pursuits, like how do I be better? And I'm just grabbing from everywhere. And I still have those tendencies, but it gave me an actual direction where it's like, no, here's a path. Now you can be as windy on that road, but you're going in this direction. This is the direction to go in and follow it. And it helped kind of stabilize that a little bit, which is where the impact happened. So I could actually apply pressure in the correct direction instead of just aimlessly wandering.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely, it added like direction. Like, okay, now I see there's two paths before me. I can either just be like, yeah, okay, whatever, and cruise through this, or I can take these lessons to heart and travel the harder road to get to a more purposeful existence.
You know what it also, that's a good point, but you know what it also reminded me of? In Harry Potter when Harry goes to Diagon Alley and Hagrid ticky-taps on the wall, it opens up and you're like, whoa, there's a whole wizarding world back here. That's how I felt for me in Masonry, where I was like, oh my God, there's a whole Mason world all over here with all this weird stuff with Templars and appendant bodies and Shriners on little cars and, like all this myriad of like this whole sub-world underneath the real one. And I was like, oh, wow, it's like Harry Potter. I was like, there's a whole wizarding world back here.
Oh, man. Well, you know what? I think that's a good place to wrap this one up. There's a whole world of Freemasonry hidden right behind that wall.
You just got to find a half giant to open it for you. And we all know a half giant in Lodge.
Or some full giants for that matter. But
shout out to Vargas. He knows where Diagon Alley is.
All right. That was awesome, and I think we should get to our new Wednesday night thing that we're going to try to do fairly regularly. If you follow us on Facebook, you'll be able to see posts of when we are doing it.
And Discord.
We're in Discord.
We'll announce in Discord too. Yep.
Right. Where we're just going to be on a Discord voice channel chatting while Andrew edits the episode and just hanging out and having a good time. So if you ever want to join us, make sure you are following us on Facebook and you have joined our Discord.
Yep, and if you're trying to figure out the hours, generally it starts between like 9:30 and 10 p.m. Central Time. You'll usually see us on there and look out for the announcements.
Awesome. And if you want to reach out to us a different way, you can always email us at
timeforfellowship@gmail.com.
timeforfellowship@gmail.com. You have a great day, everyone.
Take care.